Your person can't sleep tonight, and you're the reason. Why wait? Pause for a second. Something quiet, something almost invisible has just shifted, and even though you can't see it, your person is awake right now, in a room they thought would let them rest. The lights are off. The world outside their window has gone still, the kind of still that's supposed to make sleep easy. But sleep isn't coming. And the strange part is, they don't fully understand why. Earlier tonight, they were out somewhere they thought would be a distraction. Friends, conversation, a low hum of music in the background. Everything they usually use to fill the gaps inside them. And it was working, mostly, until somebody, almost in passing, said your name. Just one mention, almost nothing. But it followed them home. And now, hours later, they're still holding it, still hearing it, still trying to figure out why a single sentence about you cracked open a place they thought they had locked for good. If this message speaks to your heart, comment, "I received this, love," like the video, and subscribe for more. Let me walk you back to how it happened, because the moment itself was so small that nobody at that table would call it a turning point. The night had been ordinary in the way most meaningful nights start. They had told themselves they needed to get out, needed to feel normal, needed to stop sitting alone with their own head for once. So they showed up. They wore that small, easy smile they've been practicing. They ordered the first drink quickly, the way people do when they want the night to start before they have time to think. They were laughing on cue, nodding at the right moments, telling the story of their week the way they always tell it, edited just enough to sound okay. Nobody who looked at them would have guessed anything was off. That's the thing about people who are skilled at hiding. They don't always look sad. They look fine. Sometimes they look better than fine. They've learned how to be charming, how to be present, how to play the part. But underneath it, there's a low static they can't always silence. And tonight, that static found a frequency. It came through somebody at the table, maybe a mutual friend, maybe somebody who knew you both, even just a little. The conversation had drifted, the way conversations do, from one thing to another, and at some point your name came up, not as a topic, just as a reference, the kind of reference that's supposed to be neutral. But the person who said it added something honest at the end, something that went past your name and into who you actually are, the way you carry yourself. Something you did once that they never forgot, the way you treated your person specifically. A small observation, said without weight, said without trying to make a point, just spoken, just true. And it's the truest things, said most casually, that hit the hardest. Stay with this, because there's a deeper emotional layer here, and it's the part most people misunderstand about regret. Regret doesn't usually arrive when we're alone with our thoughts. We've gotten too good at editing those. Regret arrives when somebody else, by accident, says something we already knew but had been refusing to hear in our own voice. Your person didn't react the way you might imagine. There was no flinch, no long silence, no face that gave it away. They were too practiced for that. But there was a tiny pause, the kind only the most observant person at the table would have noticed, and probably nobody did. Their fingers moved a little slower around their glass for a second. Their eyes found a spot on the table and stayed there a beat too long. They laughed at the next thing somebody said. But the laugh didn't quite reach the same place it had a minute earlier, and they reached for their drink sooner than they normally would. Just one sip, then another, trying to wash the sentence down before it could settle in. It didn't work. Some sentences refuse to be washed down. Some sentences crawl into your bloodstream and stay there for the rest of the night, doing quiet work, even when you think you've moved on to other topics. The conversation moved forward. Of course it did. Conversations don't wait for anybody's heart to catch up. But your person was no longer fully there. Half of them was still at the table, holding up their part of the night. The other half had wandered off, somewhere they hadn't allowed themselves to go in a long time, back to a small memory of you that came out of nowhere and refused to leave. Maybe it was a gesture. The way you used to hand them their coffee in the morning. The way you laughed at something stupid they said. The way you looked at them when they were having a hard day, like you actually saw them, not just the version they put on for the world. Memories like that don't usually announce themselves. They show up sideways through unrelated doorways, and tonight, that doorway opened on its own. This is where things quietly began to shift. Not loudly, not all at once. Just a slow recognition that this small thing they had been pretending didn't exist anymore was in fact very much still there. Still living inside them. Still taking up space. Still waiting to be acknowledged. When the night ended, they said their goodbyes the way they always do. Easy hugs. Light promises to do this again soon. A wave at the door. Maybe they took a long way home. Maybe they sat in their car for a few minutes before starting the engine, just listening to the silence inside the cabin. And it's there, in those quiet pockets between the noise of the night and the silence of home, that the real thinking started. Why does this still feel unfinished, they thought. Not as a sentence exactly. More as a feeling that finally had words. Why does her name from someone else's mouth feel like that? Why did one casual line shake something I told myself I had already settled? They didn't have an answer. They just had the question. And once a question like that opens up inside somebody, they don't get to close it back down on command. By the time they got home, they were tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. They went through the motions, took off their shoes, set their keys down, got water, maybe brushed their teeth, maybe didn't. The body kept moving, but the mind had already gone somewhere else. And this is the part they're still trying to understand. Why being seen by somebody else, somebody outside the situation, hit harder than every private thought they've ever had about you? Because we all have a way of dismissing our own inner voice. We tell ourselves we're being too sentimental, too nostalgic, too soft. But when somebody else, with no agenda, mirrors what our own heart has been quietly insisting on, we can't dismiss it the same way. The defense doesn't work. The reframe doesn't work. The old story we built about why it ended starts to wobble. So they got into bed. And the bed didn't feel like rest. It felt like a stage. Like they were lying there waiting for something. They reached for their phone to scroll the way they always do when they don't want to be alone with their thoughts. The blue light filled the room. They looked at things they didn't actually see. 10 minutes turned into 30. 30 turned into an hour. And somewhere in there, they did what they had been quietly avoiding. They went to your name. They didn't open anything. They didn't read old messages, even though part of them wanted to. They just looked at the name, the letters, the shape of it. The way it felt to see it written there after all this time of pretending it didn't matter. And then they locked the screen, and then they unlocked it, and then they locked it again. And the phone went down on the chest, screen down, like that could undo anything. What happens next isn't loud, but it changes everything. Because now they're staring at the ceiling, and the ceiling is a terrible audience. The ceiling doesn't laugh at distractions. The ceiling doesn't fill the silence. The ceiling just lets you hear yourself. And what they heard in their own voice surprised them. Maybe I let go too quickly. The thought came in soft, almost shy. Maybe I didn't actually understand what I was doing when I stepped back. Maybe what I called clarity was really just fear. Maybe what I called moving on was really just trying not to feel. These aren't dramatic thoughts. They're quiet, almost embarrassed, like a child finally telling the truth. And they don't come all at once. They come in layers with long pauses between them, the way real honesty works at 3 in the morning. This is where understanding slowly begins. They started replaying something specific, not the highlight reel, not the obvious moments. A small one, a throwaway moment. Maybe an evening that hadn't seemed important at the time. The two of you in some ordinary place, doing nothing in particular. Maybe you said something that made them feel safe. Maybe you didn't say anything at all and they still felt it. Whatever it was, They realized tonight that they had been carrying it the whole time. Without permission, without acknowledgement, just carrying it like a stone in a pocket they kept forgetting they had. If you've felt this shift too, you already understand what I'm describing. It's that strange ache that isn't dramatic, that isn't even sad in the usual way. It's the ache of something true coming back into focus after a long time of pretending it had blurred. They tried to sleep. They turned over. They turned the pillow. They closed their eyes and counted breaths. They told themselves it didn't matter. They told themselves they were tired. They told themselves they'd think about this in the morning, when their head was clearer. But the body knew something the mind was still arguing with, and the body wouldn't let them go under. There's a moment somewhere around now in their night where the resistance just runs out. You can only push back against your own truth for so long before the muscles give. And theirs gave tonight, not in a way that broke them, in a way that finally let something through. They didn't cry. People like them rarely do. But they sighed. A long, slow exhale, the kind that comes from a place too deep to perform. And in that exhale, something that had been held tight for a long time loosened, just a little. Just enough, and this is the part they didn't see coming. The third party's words from earlier didn't just remind them of you. They reminded them of who they had been when they were with you. The version of themselves they liked. The version that didn't have to perform. The version that didn't reach for a drink to take the edge off the hour. The version that was softer, more present, more honest. The version they had quietly missed without ever telling anyone. They've been moving through life lately wearing somebody else. A louder version, a busier version. A version that smiles bigger and laughs longer. Tonight in the dark, they realized that version was a costume. And the person inside the costume hadn't been seen in a long time. Except maybe by you. Except maybe back then. You don't need to force this. Don't try to do anything with this information. Just let it be true. The shift inside them tonight isn't something you have to manage. It's not something you have to respond to. It's something that's happening on its own, in its own time. The way real shifts always happen. There's a verse that's been quietly with me as I tell you this. Psalm says weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Not because the morning fixes everything. Because something about night has a way of bringing the truth to the surface, and something about morning has a way of giving us the strength to hold it. Your person is in the night part right now. They're letting something surface that they've been pushing down for too long, and they don't know it yet. But they're going to wake up changed by this, in ways they won't be able to fully name. What happens next isn't a grand decision. It isn't a sudden message at 3 in the morning. They're not going to leap. People like them don't leap. They settle. They reorganize, slowly, privately. They'll lie there a while longer. Eyes open, then closed, then open again. They'll think about who they want to be. They'll think about who they were when they were honest. They'll think about you, not in some idealized way, but in a clearer way, sharper, without the distortion they had wrapped around the memory to make it easier to leave behind. This is the part where regret starts to soften into something more useful. Not regret as punishment. Regret as information. Their heart is telling them something about what mattered, and for the first time in a long time, they're listening without arguing back. Stay with this, because the real meaning of tonight isn't about whether they message you tomorrow, or next week, or 3 months from now. The real meaning of tonight is about who they're becoming as they lie awake processing something they can't unsee. They're slowly, quietly, becoming someone capable of being honest with themselves again. And only that kind of person could ever come back to you in a way that meant something. Why did hearing her name from someone else hit like that? They keep asking themselves. Because it bypassed every defense. Because it didn't come from their head, where they had built walls. It came from the outside, from a place those walls couldn't reach. It came as just a fact, said without intention. And facts said without intention have a strange power. They don't try to convince you, they just are. And being is louder than arguing. Around now, the room has settled into that particular kind of stillness that only exists very late. The kind where you can hear the refrigerator. The kind where every small sound is exaggerated. They might check the time and feel a small wave of frustration that it's already this late and sleep still hasn't come. They might get up for water. They might stand at the kitchen for a moment longer than necessary, half lit by the light over the stove, holding a glass and not drinking from it, the body doing one thing while the heart does another, and then they go back, lay down again, adjust the pillow one more time. And in that lying down, something settles, not happiness, not peace exactly, more like surrender, the surrender of finally admitting, even just to themselves, that something is still there, that something hasn't gone where they sent it, that something has been waiting patiently for them to stop running. If this resonates, let it settle in you. Don't rush to interpret it. Don't try to predict what it means for tomorrow. Just let yourself feel that the silence you've been hearing on their end was never empty. It was full. Full of a process they couldn't share with you, because they hadn't even shared it with themselves yet. There's a gentleness that comes over them in the last hour, before they finally drift off. They might think about reaching out. The thought arrives, soft, hesitant, not as a plan, as a possibility. They imagine what they'd say. They start drafting something in their head. They abandon it. They start again. They abandon that too. None of the words feel right because the words aren't really the point. What they actually want to say is something they don't have language for yet. Something like, I see it now. Or, I think I made a mistake about something more important than I admitted. Or just, I miss you, in a way that doesn't have any conditions attached to it. They don't send anything. Not tonight. The phone stays where it is. But the impulse, once felt, doesn't disappear. It gets recorded somewhere inside them. And the next time it surfaces, it'll have more weight behind it. And the time after that, even more. Until eventually, it'll be heavier than the resistance. What you need to hold on to is this. The shift is real. It started tonight. It might not look like much from where you're standing, but it's real. And real things, once they start, don't reverse. They only continue. Sometimes slowly, sometimes invisibly, but always forward. And while their world quietly rearranges itself, your only job is to keep being the person they remembered tonight. Don't shrink. Don't audition. Don't rehearse what you'd say if they reached out. Just be. The version of you that's coming back to them in flashes is the version that didn't try to be anything other than honest. Stay there. Don't trade her for anxiety. Don't trade him for performance. Whatever they decide to do with what they're feeling, you've already done the deeper work. You loved without distortion. That's never wasted. Even when it takes the long way home, eventually sleep will find them. Not deeply, not all at once. They'll drift in and out for a while. And when they finally wake up tomorrow, something will feel slightly different in them. Even if they can't put their finger on it. They might check their phone first thing, the way people do, half hoping to see your name there, half relieved that they don't have to face it yet. They'll go through their morning. They'll make coffee. They'll tell themselves it's fine. They'll tell themselves they're fine. But underneath, something has moved. And that something isn't going to move back. Not now. Not after tonight. Tonight was the night their own honesty caught up with them in the form of somebody else's voice. And honesty, once it catches up, doesn't fall behind again. What they thought they had buried wasn't buried. What they thought they had figured out, they hadn't. What they thought they could outrun, finally looked them in the eye, in the dark, in the silence, in the place where they couldn't pretend anymore. And what they're beginning to realize now is something they can't walk away from anymore. Not this time.